Today, we're looking at Private Reserve's Copper Burst. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Private Reserve's Copper Burst is a brown ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Noodler's Ahab with a modified flex nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. And up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. And what we see is this nice magenta line across the bottom that gets lighter with some streaking as it moves up, and oddly, this very yellow across the top, which for a brown ink, to go from that kind of magenta with yellow is truly interesting. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we see a very dark, thick magenta line at the bottom, some pink moving up, and then the yellow. This makes me feel that this is going to have some permanence to it. Resistance tests are done so you can see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean out of your pen. Resistance tests are allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it seems to perform flawlessly. There's no feathering and no spreading, no reactivation whatsoever. Now, when it comes to looking at water, and I put that drop down for 30 seconds, it does move a lot of the darker colors away, but leaves a ton of the ink behind, only leaving this kind of purpley color there. Pen flush lifts much more of that ink off the page. We start to see some very, very light pink areas. Makes me feel that pen flush is the best option to get this out of your pen. And bleach completely removes it from the page. It does leave some yellow staining behind. My hope is that there's no need for bleach to remove this from a pen. For the inks I've tested, I found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's Copper Burst has a viscosity of 1.67, which makes it pretty darn wet. It's in the red. It's coming up on the orange where it would just be wet, but this is a very wet ink. Now, to find my average dry times, I use the writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. Private Reserve's Copper Burst has an average dry time of 10 seconds, which is a faster dry time. It's faster than some of Private Reserve's fast dry inks. Considering how wet it is, I'm pretty impressed with that. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I like to use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at Clairefontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Great color variation the whole way through. Look at that. Pow! Nice. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shading. All over. 7 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shading. It's fantastic. This is very nice. Now, this is no ancient copper, but this right here is my number 2 copper ink right here. This is fantastic. Really great color, great performance. If you have a pen that's a little more difficult to deal with inks, I find that the Private Reserves tend to do pretty good unless it needs if it needs a little more viscous ink and you want that copper color, this is a good ink for it over the ancient copper. So both are great, very different in their viscosities. So that's great to be able to deal with here. Let me double check this. This one had a viscosity of 1.7. The ancient copper had 4.42. So it ran, quite a bit different. Come back to my notes here. There we are. 11 seconds to dry. Great. Look at the scrubby. Look at the color variation in the scrubby, and it's all over in the writing.
The smear, you could definitely recover this if you smeared it. So we look at Tomoe River. Wow, that looked gross on the back. Ugh. All right, we just learned something about this ink. This right here, that's not bleed. But if you get it onto the page above it, it looks gross. It looks gross. I'm sorry. It's like somebody smeared a booger. It looks gross. We have no bleeding. We have ghosting. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and great shading on Tomoe River paper. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Just, it's like it's blowing out from right there. Blowing out from right there, but it's not doing it nice. Now when we get to the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. 9 seconds to dry. Mediums, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 17 seconds. Yeah, I just want to get through that part. It just makes it boring. The paper makes this boring to deal with. Extra fine and medium scrubby both give us no shading, and we really don't see it in the writing sample. The smear, you wrote it on Tomoe River. You don't get to write or to read what was written there, and it looks like there's a booger on the back of the page. Rhodia paper, that's not a bleed, that's a transfer from underneath. I'm apparently quite sloppy, and I put paper down on paper before it gets there. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Great shading all over there. Fantastic. Extra fine, definitely a different shade than we had with the 1.1, a different tone of the color. The extra fine gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Great shading all over. This is great. This is a really fantastic performing copper ink, and it deserves that name of copper. 7 seconds to dry. Looking at the medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It went down much heavier, so we don't have nearly the color variation. 10 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubby, the extra fine shows us a lot of color variation, the medium not so much, and both the smears say you could recover this. Now I put this into an Ahab so that I could really stretch out some of that, and I didn't make a whole to-do on it. I don't go after the huge flex, but you can. Stop bending that page up. Oops. So I modified the nib so that I could get a lot more flex from this without pushing so hard. I don't really get more flex, I just get it easier. But look at what goes on in that color variation just as we put it down. Nice. So I like this ink. I like how it performs. I like the colors I get from it. It makes me happy. I'm looking at TWSBI paper. The TWSBI paper gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and fantastic shading. Great. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Look, 5 seconds to dry, and we get great shading all over it. All over it. Even with the tone paper that makes it a little bit darker. Great. This is one of my favorite notebooks, TWSBI notebooks. Medium gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Great shading all over. Really nice. 8 seconds to dry. So with these fast dry times, we're still getting a lot of great color variation, which makes this amazing for me. Truly amazing. The scrubby in both the extra fine and the medium show us that we're going to get plenty of color variation, and we do. The smear test says we're going to be able to recover this if we smeared while we were writing. So then I tested Leuchtturm 1917 because I know a lot of people like using these notebooks. I enjoy these notebooks. I don't always go for hardcover notebooks, which is my problem with them. I would like it in a soft cover. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. And that's because I want to be able to fold a notebook up and jam it in my back pocket. That's all. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and look at that shading. Great. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shading. Yes, shading all over the place. It shades. Can I say it shades? It's shaded on every paper. 4 seconds to dry. Great shading, great dry time. You can't ask for better dry time than that. 4 seconds, and it's not coming through the page. Normally you get something like that, it comes through the page. It just means it goes straight in, straight through because the page is a sponge. Not here. With the medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We have minor shading. I'm going to call it minor shading. I'm going to avoid where my thumb was. And I see it in dry. I see it in dog. I see a little bit of it right here at the beginning of and the beginning of brown. But other than that, it's the same dark tone. We get spots of it being lighter. And that's it. Now with the scrubby, the extra fine shows us the great amount of color variation that we're going to get. And we did get. The medium shows us that we're not going to get a lot of color variation. And it's funny because we only saw the lighter areas at the beginning and we only see the lighter area at the beginning. And we would expect to be able to recover this if we smeared it based on the smear test. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve's Copper Burst, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I've chosen Elixir's Black, because this Copper Burst can come quite light at times and often dark, but the Elixir Black is a super dark black, which really helps it. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Private Reserve's Copper Burst? Well, it's no ancient copper, but this is a great shade of ink, a great shade of brown with great shading. It performs incredibly well. Thanks for watching.